Governance Counter-Fraud faculty, and I lead the CIPFA Better Governance Forum. The aim of this webinar is to give you more information about the CIPFA Code of Practice on managing the risk of fraud and corruption, and to give you useful pointers to help you put it into practice. First of all, I'll outline the principles that make up the Counter-Fraud Code, and then go on to consider the practical issues. The code itself was launched in October 2014 as part of CIPFA's suite of products and services from our new Counter-Fraud Centre. The code builds on CIPFA's previous guidance on managing the risk of fraud, which was commonly known as the Red Book. The code replaces the Red Book as CIPFA's recommended practice, and it can be applied across all parts of the public services. The code is made up of 5 principles, which are mutually supportive. It is deliberately aimed at the leadership of the organisation. It isn't enough for good work to be done in responding to or investigating frauds. You need top-level commitment to help build an anti-fraud culture. Plus, there needs to be that top-level acknowledgement that risks exist and commitment to take the necessary action. The second principle, identify risks, focuses on risks. Not every public body has the same risks, and risks change over time. Without a proper fraud risk process, it's too easy for people to make assumptions. For example, we don't have that problem here, or we only have to worry about claimant fraud and not other forms. The next principle is about strategy. This isn't about having a policy or fraud response plan. A strategy is about how your organisation plans to respond to its fraud risks, and this includes both proactive and responsive elements. So, for example, your strategy should set out objectives, such as improving your resilience to fraud or reducing a certain type of fraud. The strategy then sets out exactly how you'll do that and by when. Resources are essential. Sometimes specialist resources are needed, for example, to conduct an investigation. For other things, though, such as running a staff awareness session or undertaking data analysis, different skills might be needed, so you need to consider the range of resources required. Finally, the 5th principle is take action. Make sure you have what is required in terms of your policies, and then put your strategy into action. By taking action, the organisation is able to demonstrate its commitment to fighting fraud. So why should you implement the Counter-Fraud Code? Well, the primary reason is to improve your resilience to fraud. I can't guarantee that you'll never suffer from fraud again, but I do believe that your arrangements to prevent fraud will be more robust, and your capacity to deal with it if it happens will be much stronger. One of CIPFA's main aims in moving from the Red Book to the Code was to establish some high-level principles suitable for discussion with top management and members. So implementing the code is a perfect opportunity to talk to the leadership team about fraud and what is being done about it. So it will certainly raise the profile and understanding of what fraud means to the organisation. The code is consistent with good governance principles, and that's something of particular importance to CIPFA. CIPFA thinks that governance statements provide the opportunity to review existing counter-fraud arrangements and to publicly commit to improve. The code has support from DCLG, the Home Office, as well as counter-fraud professionals, but it does remain a voluntary code. If you're an internal auditor, then this may be of interest to you. You're probably aware of the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards to consider how the organisation manages fraud risk. You can use the code to support your audit work and inform the Head of Audit's annual opinion on governance, risk and control. Using the code provides a robust way to evidence how the organisation manages its fraud risks, and therefore will support that annual internal audit opinion. I'm now going to consider some of the practical issues. And there may be a range of reasons why a proposal to implement the counter-fraud code may be met with resistance or reluctance, or at least lack of enthusiasm. So it is important that you take a realistic approach and to seek to understand those issues and to work out why there may be barriers or what else you can do to support them. There may be competing priorities, for example, or there may be concerns that this initiative will cost money, or that the risks of fraud may not be adequately understood, and therefore the need for the code not appreciated. To address these concerns, you need to have a clear business case for how improving anti-fraud arrangements will support your organisation. So I've put down there a number of bullet points setting out some of those potential issues or concerns, and I say it is important to work out what exactly is the issue that you may be faced with. Two other challenges relate to evidencing the assessment and ensuring the right people contribute to it. These are important considerations, as ideally you want an assessment that is based on firm evidence and is widely supported. CIPFA has developed further resources to help overcome these practical difficulties, and later on in this webinar I'll say a little bit more about them. One word of caution is be wary about leaving it up to one person to complete the assessment. Will they really know the full range of activity across the organisation? Will they know how successful some activities are in practice? It is helpful to get that wider engagement. Once you've done the assessment, what happens next? How do you gain the support for improvement actions and acceptance of results? Obviously, it depends on what needs to be done, but if the need for significant changes or additional resources are required, then you'll need to work to ensure support. One of the things I've mentioned here is publicity, and sometimes people are wary of publicity on fraud matters because they worry their organisation might look bad if you talk about fraud. The fact that you've used the code to assess where you are should be a positive message. It shows the organisation is serious about tackling fraud and corruption. So do consider the opportunities for positive publicity. And as I say, if you want to gain good support for the outcome of the assessment, then involving people in the process is a really good way to do that. There are always pitfalls for this sort of assessment, and this might undermine the success of your evaluation. The first one here is perhaps not putting in the time to really make sure that your assessment is backed up by evidence. And this might mean that your assessment is not quite as accurate as it could be. So do allow time to make sure that can be done. Secondly, where evidence is needed from other teams, then it's too easy to assume you know the answer without asking them. Again, this could lead to an inaccurate result. And finally, you may have concerns that the answers to some statements could reflect badly on senior managers, or on decisions that have already been made. And it can be tempting to provide an answer that's acceptable rather than accurate in those circumstances. Do be aware of that risk. The more robust you can make your assessment through the use of evidence, the more it's going to be able to stand up to scrutiny. As I've already mentioned, using a team approach can be a helpful way. So certainly seek a sponsor for your assessment. The audit committee is perhaps an obvious one here. Counter-fraud should be a core function that works across the organisation. So a team approach is a really good message that supports that corporate approach for counter-fraud. It's good to involve people who have that overview of the organisation on perhaps related matters. So, for example, legal or your HR team will have knowledge of governance or ethical policies or the organisation's code of conduct, and that can be useful to help inform your assessment. I mentioned the guidance notes as one of the tools that are available to you to support your assessment. This guides you through the code and provides examples of the things you can consider when you do it. Although the code is voluntary and can apply across different organisations, the interpretation may be different in a large organisation than perhaps in a small one, and the guidance notes will assist you with that judgment. I'd now like to introduce the assessment tool. The screen I'm showing here is the home page of the assessment tool. The tool has 5 sections that match the 5 principles of the code, and you can see those on the bottom left of the screen. The tool comes with comprehensive guidance and FAQs to help you get the most from it. If you look on the top left, you'll see the buttons that will take you to the FAQs. Once you've completed at least one section of the assessment tool, you'll have access to the results and reports pages, and these are on the right-hand side. So what is the assessment tool? It follows the counter-fraud principles and sets out a number of performance statements that describe good practice, and you make your assessment against that. And it provides evidence to inform your judgment. What we're aiming for here is a balance between making the assessment quick and easy for you to undertake, but also one that isn't too quick and subjective, that is based on those just snap judgments. So at the end of it, you'll have an auditable evidence assessment. The tool is also able to show your results with graphs, and a screenshot here shows an example of that sort of reporting functionality, and also the overall judgment that will come through having completed the whole tool. So, for example, here, the organisation has demonstrated that it has reached a good level of performance against the code. However, there are still some areas for improvement. And the graphical screen makes it easy to see which of the 5 principles needs most improvement. And these can be downloaded as a PDF for easy distribution and reporting to your sponsor. So whatever part of the public sector you're in, you can use the counter-fraud code to evaluate your arrangements. The code is consistent with the principles of good governance and emphasises the need for a corporate approach. Implementing the code will help you improve your organisation's resilience to fraud and demonstrate your commitment to manage fraud and corruption risks. Do look at the CIPFA website for additional resources to support your implementation. And I hope this webinar has given you insights that will help. Thank you very much for taking part in this webinar.